the Property Pod. Welcome to the Property Pod with Moneyweb. The property sector is an ever-changing sector. And in this podcast series, your host, Suren Naidu, chats to movers and shakers in the property industry.
Hello and welcome to the Property Pod, the country's premier weekly property investor podcast. On this Moneyweb show, we gain insider insights from leading CEOs, analysts, developers and entrepreneurs in South Africa's dynamic real estate sector. This week's episode is a coup of sorts. We have a well-known chairman on the podcast. He is none other than Nigel Payne, the longtime chair of JSE-listed Vukile Property Fund, which brought out its results last week, and robust results indeed. But if you know the retail sector well, you'll also know that he's chairman of the Durban-headquartered retailer Mr. Price that turned 40 earlier this year. Both are major success stories in South Africa. And Nigel, we are very excited to have you on the podcast. Welcome to the Property Pod.
Hi, Suren. Thank you so much. I really appreciate the opportunity to engage with you. And I also have to say, Moneyweb, thank you. Every morning I get up, I switch on my coffee percolator, and then I click on Moneyweb. You're the first thing I read every day, understand what's happening in our South African context. I then go and read Bloomberg, and I'm all good to go. And actually, even broader than Moneyweb, a huge thank you to all of our South African media. You are playing an absolutely vital role in South Africa at the moment. Thank you.
Nigel, thanks for that. I didn't expect it, but it's always good to get kudos from a person like yourself who knows a lot what's happening in the corporate governance space in South Africa. I've, in fact, been trying to get you on the podcast for a while. The latest pause was because, the both companies that you chair, their results were coming out and we had to hold because it was a closed period. But you are one of the top governance minds in the corporate sector, as I mentioned. And we highlighted that it's both Vukile Property Fund and Mr. Price. I think you might have been at Mr. Price for longer. But Nigel, you've been on these boards for several years. Can you share some insights for those who might not know? How long has it been in these listed property companies? And what does it mean to you to contribute to corporate South Africa in these quite crucial roles?
Thanks, Suren. So I joined the Vukile board in 2012. In fact, 2012 was a very important year for me because that's also when I was asked to become the chairman of the board of the Mr. Price Group. I'm currently also the lead independent director on the board of Bidcorp. I'm the chairman of Straight, and then the SA SME Fund, which is doing a great job in helping South African entrepreneurs and SMEs. I'm a non-executive on that board. Yeah, it's a privilege to serve on a board. Boards are teams, but yeah, as the chairman, then not only to serve on the board and as a member of the team, but a leadership role to focus on inspiring, on improving, and specifically on furthering the dreams and beliefs of the founders of, in the case of Mr. Price Group, Stuart Cohen and Laurie Chapini, working with great CEOs at Vukile, Lawrence Rapp, Mark Blair at Mr. Price, and similarly on the other boards I'm on. Yeah, and to contribute to the economy of the country. Ultimately, the economy defines what kind of country you have.
So you talked about that, but we are quite a resilient nation. People don't like mentioning resilient too much because South Africa has been through so much over the last decade or so. Before we go into some of those things that you might share some insights on or your thoughts on, as a doyen in corporate governance, how did you come to play a role in this space? I understand many moons ago you started off in auditing.
Yeah, Suren, the real context starts even many moons before that. But it's very relevant in how my life has unfolded. With my parents, they grew up really poor. My mother left school when she was 12 years old. Started working in a little shop on her 13th birthday. For the first year, her parents had to pay the shop owners the equivalent of her school fees to allow her to work there. She got no pay. The second year, she got no pay. When she turned 15, they were able to start paying her a salary. Our dad left school when he was 14. He used to proudly say 14 and a half. To go and work as a farm laborer, poor rural area, milking cows by hand and selling the milk door to door from the back of a donkey cart. Two things foundational for me from that. Firstly, they had an absolute passion for education, which has flowed through to my brother, a medical specialist, and myself. But secondly, and I'm going to say very, very sadly, reflecting on my parents, had a better education than the majority of South African matriculants today. And I think widely known, South Africa is rated as having amongst the world's worst education. My brother and I were very lucky. We grew up in Queenstown in the Eastern Cape, went to Queen's College. And even there, wow, one of my strongest memories from Queen's College in apartheid South African times was that the black families in the town who weren't allowed to come to our school would come to our sports events, particularly our rugby, and support Queen's like they loved us. Queen's College is now mainly a black school, totally supported by the former pupils, mainly white. There's the story of South Africa. It's all of us, all in for everybody, the best of everything. From there, I had to put myself through universities. I studied part-time, BCom honors, chartered accountant, MBA, all part-time. The advantage of that, by the time I was 28 and became a partner in a big audit firm, I'd already had 10 years of work experience, including quite a few years as a CFO in the textiles industry. And he talk about South African resilience. Well, one of the reasons for it is you start learning pretty early on if you have that kind of opportunity. Moving into the director environment, I started becoming in my late 30s more and more interested about strategy, risk management. How do you make this stuff happen? And corporate governance movements worldwide. It happened. We'd had the King Code. We had the Cadbury Code in the UK. I started learning everything I could about that. Then I got invited to join the King Committee, persuaded the King Committee that King 2 needed a chapter on risk management. There wasn't anything about risk management in any of the international corporate governance codes. So I led the team that wrote the risk chapter in King 2, and that suddenly resulted in me being invited to join the board in those days of the JSE. It had just become listed on itself. Invited to join the board of Bidvest, and then Mr. Price, and then a number of others from there. So that's kind of how it started for me, and I've been very, very lucky at that.
Thank you for that. It's an incredible story, and it also is a connection to me because you can make it no matter where you come from. You know, you talked about your parents. I have a granny who's still alive today, an octogenarian. She worked in a textiles factory or a clothing factory, and if she had the opportunities we have today, she would be a medical doctor or a lot more successful. But I'm sure your parents are tremendously proud of your achievements. Thanks for your frankness as well with that insight, because we know the Eastern Cape is a hub of development rugby. You look at Siya Kolisi, and there's a lot of history that goes into that part of South Africa. Mr. Price and Vukile are heavyweights in their respective sectors. Can you share some highlights of your time? I didn't realize you started at both around the same year, 2012.
I actually started Mr. Price earlier. So 2012 was when I became chairman, but I'd already been on the board for about 4 years at that time.
Because I remember you once were a keynote speaker either at the SAPAR conference or the SACSC conference, and back then you were very frank about service delivery as well. So I've got an elephant's memory on that.
Incredible that you remember that, because I got part kudos and part criticism. It was held in Durban, and I said, we got to be frank here. Municipal infrastructure is going to collapse. We're going to have electricity grid failure. We're going to end up without drinkable water. How are we going to overcome collapsing municipalities? And that was around about 2010 or 2011.
My gosh.
And people were saying, why are you so negative? And I say, no, it's not negative. These are the things we must try and avoid, try and prevent from happening. Unfortunately, I also spoke about the risk of port collapse. I deserve a smack for being so negative.
No, but I suppose you would have hoped that people took it more seriously, because you also have your ear to the ground, listening with the stock is, for example, coming in, how efficiently it's coming in.
Yes.
And especially, I think at that time, I am formerly from Durban. I know that Durban Port was rated as one of the top in Africa, and now
one of the best in the world.
Okay, let's just hope things are turning around, because we're hearing some good signs from Transnet at the moment, even though they're a little bit on the back foot compared to where Eskom is. But thanks for that again. Nigel, what are some of your highlights in those two respective roles? Pretty different companies, but as I said, they're kind of South African stalwarts and are actually performing quite well in their respective sectors.
Thanks, Suren. So, two very different companies, but interestingly, the amount of commonality, things that, just you asked me about highlights there. So the culture, the people, passion, focus on performance, on strategic execution, on partnering. Who are we doing business with? Who's the customer? How do we serve the customer? Who are our suppliers? Landlord and tenant as an example. So, passion, partnership, the team mindset, the winning mindset, almost very much like you mentioned sport in the Eastern Cape. So a sport winning team fun mindset permeates both of those organizations, even though, Vukile, in terms of number of staff, including South Africa and Spain, about less than 50 staff here and 50 in Spain. Mr. Price has got well over 30,000 staff. So the organizations are significantly different, and yet the cultures come through a lot of similarities. Resilience is something that stands out for me as well. How do you bounce back if you take a tumble? And times have happened like that. I mean, COVID across both of those, the bounce back. Other things on my career is not specifically to Mr. Price or Vukile, but in my Bidvest and Bidcorp times. So both of those grow organically, but also through acquisition, and things that I've seen common there that apply also to Mr. Price and Vukile. How do you say no to big, bad acquisitions? That's an enormously important skill. Thank you, Brian Joffe. I learned that from you. How do you say no to the big, bad stuff? How do you walk away from good stuff that is overpriced and actually can't work because it's just too expensive? So very much part of a culture. Capital allocation applies very strongly at Mr. Price, very strongly at Vukile. Non-stop research. Vukile going into Spain didn't happen overnight. It happened after about 3 years of intense research. Mr. Price buying Power Fashion and Studio 88. There was an original list of almost 50 potential targets, 3 years of research to work out which are the right ones and which ones do you say no to. So a lot of commonalities in the culture.
Thank you for that. You're absolutely right with the acquisitions there, acquisitive growth. Vukile quite bold going into Spain. As I mentioned, their results last week, Lawrence Rapp mentioned that they're getting most of their funds from Spain now, but they actually in GLA still have a significant number of properties in South Africa or space. And they're still investing in South Africa. They mentioned something about buying half of Chatsworth Centre from Sanlam. Obviously, they have a history with Sanlam there. I'm not going to delve into the nitty-gritties of the results because, you are chairperson. But as a seasoned board chair, what keeps you up at night? I know it's quite a broad question, but is it still the government service delivery side and corruption issues, or perhaps the US fallout and geopolitics currently? And I'm specifically mentioning the very topical kind of fight between Trump and South Africa.
Okay, Serena, I'm going to take two sides of that. More likely at night, what is my mind focused on? It's actually the opportunities and the positive and the growth. One of my roles as chairman is make sure we build a strong board, strong senior management teams, that we've got strategic clarity, what we're focusing on, exciting growth opportunities in both of those companies. So I spend a lot of time thinking about the positives. The other side of the conversation that you asked, yes, obviously, and I do have now a very big history or reputation in the risk management space. In South Africa, I see three challenges, and they overlap. For me, the single biggest one that's not getting nearly enough focus is education. It's my number one. Nelson Mandela was right. Education is the best way to change the world. It's the best way to change lives of families, of countries, of individuals. So we just have to up our game there. Proud to say both Vukile and Mr. Price. There's a Vukile Academy, Mr. Price Jumpstart Foundation. We focus on high school education, on training people into their first jobs, on helping them to grow and develop after that. So education for me is number one. Then the economic failure of South Africa. I was going to say lack of growth, but it's even worse than that, because on a pro rata basis to our population, caused by a government that is self-serving, corrupt, incompetent, one of the worst in the world. You overlay those, but those are where our opportunities are. Focus on education, focus on the economy, clean out this corrupt government, and we can turn it around, and there are positive examples. Firstly, corporate South Africa, there are many positive examples. Secondly, look at Cape Town, look at the Western Cape, look at National Treasury and the SA Reserve Bank. Those things work. So we got to get everything up to that standard. We are resilient. We can do it.
You tactfully avoided the US-South Africa question there, or part of it. Any thoughts on that? And is South Africa turning the corner? Because we've heard about it for the last 10 years, if not more. But we also know about the 10 lost years.
Well, if you're asking South Africa, my thoughts, and I'm not part of any process, South Africa-USA relations, and I certainly don't think we're turning a corner there. We would far rather play with Cuba or countries like that are going to get us nowhere. I think we have behaved appallingly with the United States, but I'm appalled by Trump anyway. So, yeah, can we do better? Yes, much better. Do we need to? Yes, much better. The USA is the world's biggest economy, and there's almost no way to be successful without overlapping with the biggest economies of the world.
Thanks for that. Do you also, not to put words in your mouth, but considering you were so vocal about service delivery, is that quite a big concern still, especially from a local government level?
Suren, you mentioned my speech at SAPOA in Durban a number of years ago. Just take it to the current. How many South Africans are not able to drink the water from their taps, if the taps even have water? Our government have murdered people in Hammanskraal for 15 years by forcing them to drink contaminated water because they've been looting the money that should have been spent on that. Hammanskraal is only one example. You see the reports coming out, municipality after municipality, warning about water. I do a lot of ultra-endurance extreme mountain bike events. I carry water purification tablets with me, not for water I take out the stream where there are cows drinking, or water I take out of the taps in the rural Eastern Cape or Drakensberg Mountains, or sometimes municipalities in Gauteng or Mpumalanga. But that's the lived reality of South Africans. It's not good enough. So I am strongly angry about the failure of our corrupt government.
Thanks for that. Water is the biggest issue and the crisis in South Africa at the moment. Turning to, the board side of things, it's very topical, but how important is the King Code? And the latest one has been updated. I think it's King 5. How important is that corporate governance side for South Africa? We know government, and that's a major challenge. But the private sector hasn't not had its faults. We know the issues from a corporate governance level for, like Tongaat, Hewlett and Steinhoff. Just general comments of where we're going from that perspective, because even from an accounting perspective, we were number one rated in the world about 8 years ago, and for a few years now we're off the top 5, I think.
Yeah, so South African chartered accountants, our auditing profession, the quality of our reporting and corporate governance still up there with the very best in the world. We have slipped a little bit. South African private sector in total, highly trusted, highly regarded by global investors. So corporate governance and the King Code, absolutely vital foundations. Corporates will fail without trust, transparency, integrity, but that's the foundation, that's the platform or the ticket to the game. Without those, you will fail. Once you've got those, that's not the end of the board's role. In fact, that only opens the door to, then the board has to play its role in strategy, risk management, making sure you have the right people, the right culture, rigid capital allocation, innovation, and execution, which is done by management. But you've got to make sure that the structures and the foundations and the focus are correct.
Thanks for that. It would be a remiss of me not to ask. It is increasingly topical, not as much from a South African perspective, but we have South African-born Elon Musk, people questioning his, salary in the US. So it's becoming more topical, this issue of executive pay. Are SA executives overpaid, or is it overpaid, or is it a case of, successful CEOs must be paid, and it's about retaining talent?
Well, okay, you mentioned the Tesla board remuneration. If I was on that board, I would have voted against it. I just can't get my head around that. But executive pay just in my 25-year director career, I was in fact honored. I've chaired a number of remuneration committees over the years, as well as audit committees and boards. I was honored by the South African Reward Association, which is the collective for remuneration experts and human capital experts. In 2023, they gave me their Chairman's Award for the role I've played in remuneration committees over the last 20 years or so. So maybe I'm a little bit biased. They call me an insider in the South African REM committee space, but I believe our remuneration is generally appropriate at senior executive level. A key part of that is it must be transparent. We must consider what behaviors are we trying to encourage and what behaviors are we absolutely discouraging and will do negative marking if those happen. I like long-term incentives. That aligns everybody's interests, the company, the employees, your business partners, and obviously shareholders and other funders as well. So I like LTIs funded by performance or outperformance. But I'm also going to say the top team, the quality of that top team, the senior executive team, is the difference between winning and losing. Almost as simple as that. And you can see examples of winners and losers in retail, in property. I'm going to say Mr. Price and Vukile, both winners in that space. There are losers in that space. There is a global war for talent. South Africa's talent is highly regarded. It's experienced. It's resilient. So, you need the top team. My mindset on a board, I want the equivalent of Malcolm Marx, Sia Kolisi, Ox, Sasha. They're worth much more than the entire 10th place team, even if you get them at half price. I mean, how much would I pay for the hooker in the Welsh rugby team? No, maybe that's unfair. We'll wait till after this weekend. But I think overall it's fair. The challenge in South Africa, so you need a top team appropriately remunerated and focused, etc. Our challenge in South Africa in the context of fair pay and a livable wage, our single biggest challenge is your first job. How do you get your first job? Who are the companies you can look to say, please, can I have a job and will you help train me and grow me? And that is very, very important. So first job, growth and development, and then pay for performance.
Thank you. Very frank there. We'll get to the sporty side of you before we go because people need to know about that who might not know you personally. But just out of insight, 2012, over a decade on both boards. How long more are you expected to remain on these boards? I asked Lawrence Rapp a few months ago about succession planning. So I thought I'd ask you about, is retirement on the cards anytime soon?
So firstly, I believe strongly in a mix and a balance on the board and testing for, is this director adding value? The boards particularly where I'm chairman, your strongest test is at the end of your first year. Have you actually delivered what we hoped for when you put you on the board? And then board evaluations on a regular basis. Are you making a contribution? Can you add more value? Can you chair a board committee? Are you the future board chairman? All of those kind of things. And rotate off those who are not what we need for the future and build strong boards. I just love I'm going to use the Vukile board overlapped with Castellana, our Spanish board. Just love sitting in those board meetings and looking around the room and often thinking, I'm the dumbest person in this room. Look at all this talent and intellect and skill on our boards. And that's exactly where you want to be. 9-year mindset on board tenure and evaluate carefully for, are you still independent? Are you contributing? Are you too close to management? The flip side is cycles, industry cycles in almost any industry play out over quite a few years, and you want a few people who've been around for a long time. So certainly 9 years to me is complete garbage. Many of the international proxy players say 15 years is long service. I think they're right. And so you want to mix new people, fresh thinking, asking maybe slightly uneducated questions, and then people have been around for a long time. You certainly don't want the two longest serving people on the board to be the finance director and the CEO, and they're the only people who remember what happened last time we had tough times in our industry and what should we do. So the boards I'm on, I can say quite openly because it was in the integrated report and the notice of AGM at Mr. Price. Shareholders were asked to appoint me for another period given the retirement of our co-founder, Stuart Cohen, during the year. They supported that, but yeah, pretty clearly this is likely to be my last rotation on the Mr. Price board. Vukile is likely to be probably at least one more rotation from those boards. Me retire in total. So I'm passionate about the boards I'm on and will do whatever I'm asked to do on those. When those are done or significantly reduced, maybe I'll take more.
Well, institutional knowledge, that's the key message you were talking about there. Rotation, just out of interest, is that a 5-year term? Is it different between the companies?
No, rotation is normally every third year, sometimes slightly faster than that, 1/3 of board members each year in terms of the Companies Act and JSE listings requirements. So you tend to come up probably twice every 5 years. And I think a really good mix on a board is to have a chunk of board members who are in 0 to 5 years, so still getting to know the company really well. The majority probably in the 5 to 10 year period, chairing all of your board committees, key industry skills on the board. And then some have been there quite a bit longer, again, understand the industry through the cycles. So maybe it's 2 who've been there longer, the majority in the middle block, and keep bringing in new blood, at least 1 new director every year, and rotate off those who either have made their contribution over time or just aren't making a contribution in the context of that current company.
So, Nigel, it's been a fantastic chat. We are longer than we normally have, but it's very insightful, and we don't often have a chairperson on the board. One other thing I'd like to say is that it's good to have you because Mr. Price might be a well-operated company, but they're also quite conservative. So they don't take many interviews, even for results. But that aside, lastly, on the lighter note, what's your Discovery Vitality age? The reason I ask is because you must be one of the most active seniors I know. And I'm joking about the seniors there. You're probably younger than me. And the reason I ask that is you mentioned about mountain biking, but you look very fit. Can you share some of that passion? Because you clearly passionate about sports, but you also mentioned rugby.
Yeah, Suren, thanks. So my vitality age, and I'm going to say I did my vitality health checks earlier this week, and just the whole concept of a vitality age and healthy stuff. And thank you, Adrian Gore and the Discovery team. So I don't only use the vitality age. There are actually 5 different trackers that I focus on. And yeah, the same way as my role as a chairman of a board is transition my board roles to better chairman, stronger boards with a company in great shape and fit for the future and a long way to go. So the things I track, I'm a passionate mountain biker. My all-time favorite sporting event is the Freedom Challenge race across South Africa, midwinter, unsupported mountain bike race. I normally do it with my brother. It takes about 3 weeks each time. You will get snow. It's just fantastic. I love riding Transkei Wild Coast, Kei River to the Wild Coast. Sun takes a week, ride with mates. Cape Epic, I stopped about 2 or 3 years ago. Paddling, Doozy Canoe Marathon and that for years. Comrades Marathon, although I last ran Comrades 42 years ago. Yeah, so I'm 65, I weigh 80 kilograms. More sport, bench press 100 kgs, run 10 Ks in 49 minutes. I'm telling you all the stuff I'm tracking. So there's an ambition amongst runners. So I'm 65. My vitality age and all of the other things say that I am slightly younger now than I was when I was 55. So very pleased about that. Lovely that my wife, who's about 3 years younger than me, she and I are able to go out running together on a regular basis. What a privilege. We gym together. Perhaps my ultimate target, there's a thing amongst runners called run your age. So if you're 65 years old, can you run 10 kilometers in less than 65 minutes? So my ambition at the age of 80 is to run 10 kilometers in under 60 minutes. Will I be retiring soon? No, hopefully not. Maybe that's a long answer to a simple, light-hearted question, Zorin.
Well, it tells you about work-life balance. Appreciate the passion. Nigel, it's been a fantastic chat on the Property Pod. Thank you so much for your time. That was Nigel Payne, the chair of Mr. Price Group, as well as Vukile Property Fund. He's also on the board of other JSE-listed companies.
Thanks for listening to the Moneyweb Property Pod with Suren Naidu. To listen to more episodes, go to moneyweb.co.za or the Moneyweb app and follow Moneyweb News for daily updates. Follow Suren on Twitter @Suren Naidu for more of his property industry content and other business stories.